Hello, everyone.
Hi, friends.
Welcome back to Double Life. This week we've got a very nice episode to talk through because it's Valentine's Day this week. And in the name of Valentine's Day and in the name of the week of love, we wanted to talk about self-love, our journeys with self-love, how you can actually go from potentially hating yourself and like self-loathing to self-love, because I used to think of it as a very woo-woo topic, but now I see it as like the root cause and like the root solution to literally most people's problems. Honestly, this is probably slightly controversial, but I also think like things like war and like political divide all comes from individuals not having that. I'm not going to say self-love, but like self-respect, self-confidence, which bleeds into like having that for other people as well. It bleeds into having compassion, all this kind of stuff. So I know that's a very like far-reaching conclusion to say like war is caused by a lack of self-love. It's obviously not. But I do think that like a lot of people's like individual problems, which then bleed into wider problems, are started from like not having that kind of respect and compassion from yourself. To kick things off, do we want to talk about what self-love means like to each of us? And just because I've been speaking for like a few minutes now, Farah.
Shall I take the floor? So to me, I just want to add to the point that you just made though first about like the wider problems in the world being down to people's like relationship with themselves, because I've actually done a post on this online and I talked about how I think it's because of people's insecurities, like being insecure in themselves makes them fear, like, so I talked about how they fear the loss of like their power, and even if they have status, if they're insecure in themselves, they still feel like they need more, or it's not enough, or they're going to lose it. And I really believe in that, and I just think that's why these topics are so important, because even if you get to the next level and achieve all the goals that you set for yourself, if you're not really happy within yourself, and if you're not taking that time to think about who you are and improve yourself and give yourself that love and compassion that we're just so used to giving to everyone else, you're still going to end up miserable, I think, and you're still going to end up like feeling unfulfilled. So yeah, I just like wanted to add to that because I thought that was really important. But in terms of what self-love means to me, it's only recently that I've kind of defined self-love in a different light for myself altogether, because I used to see it as this like, oh, I'm just going to spend my Sundays wearing face masks or like take a nice bubble bath, or I'm just going to do these girly things for myself. That's kind of how I took it previously. But now I see self-love as more something that you do to actually improve yourself and just focus inward a lot more. So whether that's traumas you need to heal, whether that's ways you need to build up yourself so you're not so insecure about things, comparing yourself to other people, whether that's like certain traits and things you've developed over your lifetime because of maybe your upbringing or the people you were around, like people pleasing habits, and just working through them and just improving yourself, but also improving your mindset towards yourself as well. In my head now, self-love can be quite like difficult work to do sometimes. It's just, yeah, not as fluffy as I once thought it was.
You guys won't be shocked when I agree completely with Farah.
We're like the same brain.
I want to echo what she said, but specifically on what you said there about like doing the hard work, because I have done the superficial self-love stuff, thinking that if I do that more often, I will look in the mirror and be like, you're awesome. You put face masks on every Sunday, like you're literally like the best person ever. I've tried to do that, and what I've realized probably in the last 3 years, because the last 3 years is when I've kind of realized there's like stages of self-love as well. I've realized that it requires a level of like self-love requires a level of self-acceptance, which requires you to be okay with all the bad parts of yourself. And when I say bad parts of yourself, I don't mean bad. I don't want to like instigate any more like self-shaming or blaming or anything like that. But in terms of all of your mistakes, all of the things, all of the standards that you hold yourself up against, accepting that not being there is fine and it's like normal, and it doesn't make you like a less worthy person of like being alive. And like doing that is actually a really difficult process. It's kind of similar to you've mentioned in the past, like when you go to therapy and you like have had a bad therapy session, or not bad therapy session, but therapy requires you to like dig into things you don't like thinking about, don't like talking about, have probably just buried mentally for a while, and therefore that can ruin like your day because you're like, I'm in a bad mood because I just had to unearth all this trauma in my life. Self-love is a similar thing, but you're kind of doing it to yourself. You're like becoming aware of all of your traumas and like the parts of yourself you don't like, the mistakes you've maybe like hoarded over your own head for ages, and you're allowing yourself to be okay with that. And that's just such hard work that's what I think self-love is, and that's what I didn't realize self-love was. And there's probably like a defense mechanism a lot of people have where they want to believe self-love is woo-woo because doing the hard work is like something that a lot of people are probably really far removed from being able to do. Because something I was even saying to my boyfriend was, people who enter this like self-development space or like decide they want to start working on themselves, you have to be at such a like high level of self-awareness to even do that in the first place. Like there's so many people that and friends who, when they talk to me about like their issues or like problems in life, if I like just off the cuff recommend like a book or a philosopher or something that has helped me go through a similar problem, they're not open to like reading that. They believe that they can fix it themselves, or they don't believe it's as much of a problem. And I feel like in order to even realize that self-love is something that's hard to do, you have to accept that it's not fluffy. And that little acceptance part is, I think it's just like a lot of people aren't there yet. And it takes a lot to even get there, to build that level of awareness of what you need to do. I don't even know if this is coming across like wishy-washy or not as well, because it's so hard to actually talk about self-love in like a practical way, in like a way that applies to your like daily life. And I think that's also a bit of the problem about why it's hard to even get into, and why it's even hard to realize that it's probably the root cause of most of your problems.
Yeah, but I think it's hard because it's also so different for everyone. Everyone has their own issues that they're dealing with. Everyone has their own things that they need to work through, get over. The different ways that you can give love to yourself will mean different things to different people, depending on what they've gone through, depending on the type of person they are, depending on what their lifestyle looks like. So it is hard to just have this all-encompassing definition of it, or different actions that you can do, because it will be different to different people. But I agree with what you say. I think it does take a lot of, I don't know whether it's just like self-reflection, just to realize that there's things to work on, because I feel like there's a lot of people walk this earth thinking that they genuinely don't have anything to work on, or maybe they've not gone through any traumas or things that they don't think are actual issues to work on. But I feel like everyone does, like in some form. Everyone's gone through something. It doesn't matter if it's been within your family, whether it's something external, whether it's within your work, your career. Everyone's gone through something that they probably have just buried and don't even realize it's affecting their day to day and the way they operate and the way they behave. And a lot of the things that you kind of tackle when you look at self-improvement and stuff is like within your subconscious or even your unconscious. Like you don't even realize the patterns of your behavior and the way that you even think about things, like your perspective on the world is based on these things that we've kind of just buried and left there, and are just operating based off that, but not even realizing it's there. So I get it, because even for so long, like I didn't actually realize how so many of my own experiences in life, I was very aware of them, but I didn't actually realize that they were the reason that I was actually behaving in certain ways, even years after it happened. When things happen to you, you kind of assume that time helps you process it and you kind of move on and become a different person, but actually it's not the case. Unless you tackle it and you deal with it head on, if it's something that you've just kind of accepted was in the past and don't really think about it coming up in your present in just the way that you think or behave, chances are it is still there. You're just not picking up on it. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I realized that made me actually think, no, this is such an important thing to do. Otherwise, you're not going to reach that next level, or you're not actually going to feel accomplished, even when you accomplish like big things in your life that you're trying to achieve, because there's always that lingering sense of whatever it is that you're struggling with. Even if it's buried, it comes up in the most weird ways as well. And you'll think you've got over something, and then something will trigger you or something will happen but you won't put the two together and you won't realize that that's the reason. If you're not paying attention and actually acknowledging your life.
Yeah. It's like the art of like noticing things.
Yeah, you have to be so observant to your own life. And I feel like, and I get it because I did it for such a long time. You just live, like you've got so much to do. You've got so much on your plate. There's so much busyness and noise around you. And nobody ever talks about just the simple fact of looking at yourself. Because you only do that if you're looking in the mirror, but that's only physical. Like, when do you actually get told, sit down with your own thoughts? And unless people are talking about meditating, but how many people, again, think that's woo woo or,
Yeah.
you know, like don't take it seriously? So many people, and including myself, for a long time. So it's just one of those things that until it clicks and you kind of start doing those small actions of like, just if something triggers you, kind of sitting down with yourself and like thinking, why has that triggered me? And then you just keep asking yourself those questions rather than reacting and then letting it blow over and then moving on to the next thing. You've got to like actually be really intentional about these things.
Yeah. And that brings me on to a great segue to the next question. How did you not express self-love? Like, how were you? So it sounds like you were kind of burying things and like not noticing things, and you got to a point of actually noticing your triggers and like the fact that you were triggered. Is that what you kind of did?
Yes, in a way. I think for me, it only really happened because I was in a very like toxic bubble or like environment, and only when I removed myself from that, I just started to realize a lot of things about my own behavior. I feel like when you spend so long in a toxic environment, that is so normal to you, so you don't actually pick up on anything because you just think that that's the norm, and you think these things are happening, but it happens with everyone. And even if it doesn't happen with everyone, that's just your situation. You can't change other people's behaviors around you, so you just accept it as it is. But because there's so much chaos around you, you never consider like your own actions and how that's affecting you and how you're mirroring behaviors. So it was only when I came out of that, I think there was just a point where I started self-reflecting and I started thinking about my own behavior and how I respond to situations, what triggers me, because I was now out of that. So I just had that like space to actually think about myself a little bit more. And it was only at that point then I realized how much of what I'd witnessed and what I'd been around, I was actually like embodying a lot of the time. And that's kind of when I started to realize. But it's really hard because I get it when a lot of people are in those situations and they can't get out. So when you are stuck in it, it almost feels like an impossible task to even consider like working on yourself, because when there's all this chaos and horrible stuff going on around you, you feel like it's impossible to be this really healthy person amongst all this toxic mess. So I get it. It's really difficult in that situation. And all I can say is really, if you are in a situation like that, just find any way you can to distance yourself. Like, even if you are living in an environment where that's quite difficult to like break away from completely, but the more time you spend outside of that situation, whether it's like getting a job where you work a bit longer hours, or you find a hobby on the weekends, or you just kind of create that distance, like physical distance between you and that situation or those people around you, and then that will just make it easier in the interim while you are still kind of stuck in that physical environment to cope and still be able to, you know, function as a normal person. But then also once you kind of come out of it, then you can build on the fact that you've kind of create that distance for yourself a little bit, and then continue your own healing journey and becoming a healthier version of yourself. And that's basically what I did. I think it was really hard because when I came out of it and then I realized like my own behaviors and how much I had to work on, it's so overwhelming, and there's so much like shame and then regret and all these things come up. And at that point you can also make a decision of whether you're just going to bury it, forget that ever happened, and try to move on and like not deal with it, or you can just kind of sit in it and realize like, no, if I do that, patterns are going to repeat and I won't even realize again. So that's not really a solution, in my opinion. That's kind of what triggered me to actually then start looking at it seriously and redefining what self-love meant, because at that point it stopped meaning bubble baths and face masks and all these things that were kind of taught in a way that it means. And then it started meaning therapy and like looking at traumas and stopping people pleasing habits, for example, these like traits that I had, getting diagnosed for things. I went so long having these symptoms. I've spoken to you about it before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast about getting diagnosed with PMDD. I had these symptoms for years, like literally since I was a teenager. Nothing was ever done about it. A lot of reasons for that, because it just, I don't know, became my personality, I guess, in a way. But it was only when I started this journey of I need to figure myself out and I need to figure out who I am and why I do the things I do, then I ended up getting diagnosed with PMDD. And now I have that. I can actually work on how I'm going to, I don't know if it's something that can be cured, but at least mitigate the symptoms or find a way to work with it. So I think it just like helps in so many ways to actually take this self-love journey, and but redefine it as something that's actually practical in your life.
Yeah, it's like almost self-love. Well, if you were to apply love to someone you actually loved, like someone else, how would you apply that?
Yeah.
You could see someone was struggling with their period every month. You probably wouldn't do nothing about it. You'd probably, go to an expert, find out from an expert what's wrong. Once you get diagnosed, actually doing things to help them. Like you would do that for someone you loved, so why wouldn't you do that for yourself? Like, why would you accept it as like, oh, it's just my personality that I struggle every single month for my entire life?
Yeah.
Like, you'd actually help if it was someone else. So why not? And I really like that for you, what triggered the initial self-reflection was physical space. Because, then you had that time, like that actual time and space in your mind to do that. And I'm really glad you got the opportunity to do that, because look where that's got you now as well. I think for me, what triggered everything, probably not less of a trigger, more of a like slow journey, but I've really struggled with depression. And whenever I used to get into like, so I've always called depression like the pit or the hole. So whenever I get into the hole, I just started noticing like over time how little of myself that I thought. And obviously with social media, and this is one of the reasons why I do like social media, is that I would find all these like little carousel posts on Instagram about how to fix like issues with your self-worth and like stuff like that, and I would really relate to that because I felt those feelings myself when I was in the pit. And over time I realized that my bouts of depression were caused by extreme lack of self-love and also like a lot of self-loathing almost as well. And something I really struggle with is a very perfectionisty inner critic. Like I really struggle with her. I've separated her into like a different person in my mind. But because of this inner critic, I've noticed how I talk to myself in my head. Like 2021 was a really big year for me of noticing my self-talk and just how bad it is. And 2021, how old was I? I was 25 in 2021. So, which meant I had gone 25 years with this like horrible person in my head berating me for like every single thing I've done. And a story that I've posted about it in a video somewhere, but the story that I remember very distinctly noticing how harsh I was on myself was I was going to my friend's barbecue, a really nice summer's day, 2021. Going to my friend's barbecue, and this friend, I hadn't seen them in a really long time, so I bought them a bottle of wine. I ordered my Uber, got in the Uber, and then 5 minutes before we were pulling up to my friend's barbecue, I realized I forgot the wine. And in that 5 minutes from realizing I'd forgotten the wine to getting to my friend's house, I was so mean to myself. Like I was literally calling myself names. I was calling myself a bad friend. I was calling myself like stupid, forgetful. Like I was so mean just for forgetting this bottle of wine, which I never ended up mentioning because I forgot it. And it wasn't even a big deal. It was just a barbecue. Like it was fine. And it was that day that I just remember thinking, I need to fix this because that was so unnecessary. Like I felt how unnecessary it was. And that year I really worked on like self-talk and like having compassion for myself. And it's through that I've kind of realized like what self-love is. So for me, it was kind of a different journey because I've had physical space from chaos at home for a while before that happened, but I'd still normalized so many ways of thinking up until that like point. And I don't even know, it wasn't even a breaking point. Like this was just on the way to a barbecue. So it was just like one day I noticed. And it probably was just a build up of like seeing all these posts on Instagram, knowing what symptoms are, realizing that I was depressed in the first place and I wasn't just like a sad and lazy person. That was also something I noticed. Because that was also something like I thought for ages, is that being depressed wasn't a thing and I was actually just lazy, tired, and a gremlin. Like that's what I thought of myself for a really long time. For me, my parents wouldn't accept that I was depressed. Like they just told me I was being silly when I brought it up ages ago. This is like they're very far past this point now. But when I was 18 and I mentioned it, they kind of shot that suggestion down as quickly as I brought it up. And that's what kind of fueled me even thinking that anything to do with like self-worth or like being in the pit in general wasn't depression. It was actually just like laziness, which is again my inner critic coming out. But some of the things that we've done on our self-love journey, I think I want to talk about that as well. Like what are the actual practical, like tangible things that we've done to make ourselves feel better mentally, to build up self-respect, to choose ourselves in situations that don't serve us. Like I don't know if that's something you've done. I think that essentially that's kind of what you've done by creating physical space. Like you chose yourself in a way.
Yeah, I would say so, in a way. It's hard because I think, yeah, a lot of the self-love talk and what it means to do that for yourself is also what you mentioned about the compassion and having that genuine like feeling for yourself of like giving yourself that grace. And I think that side of self-love I've struggled with a little bit more. So even though I'm doing all these things and like I know that I need to heal or I need to like change certain things or I just need to like focus on myself and improve myself, there's also that element of having compassion for yourself for making previous mistakes, for even doing things for yourself that I think there's still that element of feeling guilty for it because that's just ingrained. And I feel like that takes a lot of effort to undo.
The feeling like you're not worth it.
Yeah, not worth it, but also just the feeling of being selfish, I guess, and thinking of yourself before someone else is such a touchy subject in South Asian culture, I think. And I think as women, you're always kind of, even if you're not told specifically, it's always in the air that women should always put everyone else before themselves, their husband, their kids, their family, their everything. And because that's so common and so ingrained in the culture, it just, I think for us particularly, it makes it that little bit more difficult and has that extra barrier.
It comes back to that. I think we've mentioned it a few times, you know, that life jacket, the life jacket story or whatever the phrase, where you know you have to put your life jacket on before you put your kids on in the airplane if it's crashing, paraphrase that, but
We get what you mean.
Yeah, like if and I completely get what you mean with South Asian culture. I see that in my mum a lot. I see how little or like how badly she treats herself in the name of doing better for others.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to say with that is, and I really want you to listen when I'm saying it, is you have to treat yourself like the person that you are trying to treat better. Like you have to treat yourself well in order to be a better person. You will literally, if you're a shell of a person, you can't do nice things for other people because you're a shell of a person. If you think so little of yourself, how do you have it in you to think highly of others? Like it's cause and effect, I think, in my brain.
I get it. I think it's one of those things that comes in waves. Like I know for sure, like because even if I imagine myself having kids, for example, and seeing women operate in our culture, I will never be the kind of woman that literally like bleeds herself dry just for the sake of everyone else. But then I'm totally miserable because that has such a negative impact on everyone else around me. So it's almost like it has the opposite effect to what you want it to have. And then you're also in this horrible place for literally no reason because you've not actually served the purpose that you thought you were serving. So I 100% like agree and I hear that because I know for sure like I would make sure I was never that person. And I just, I don't know, I find it sad because I know that the generation before us has operated based off that and have thought that that's the right thing to do. So the guilt just comes from knowing better, but also, I don't know, I guess it's just a little bit of sadness for the fact that that was the reality for so many others. But I know in myself that that's not something that I would ever do or consider, because I know the effects of it, and I know how, like, it doesn't actually bring the good that you think it does. So yeah, I totally agree that you have to really be a full healthy version of yourself, which is why I'm on this journey and making the effort with this whole process in general, because I know even like the effects that I have on the people around me, it just affects everyone. It doesn't just affect yourself when you're doing this whole journey for your own self-love and your own self-healing, and also putting yourself first in a lot of situations. I think I've started to find that a bit easier. Things that used to be such a big deal to make decisions over, in terms of like not wanting to hurt people's feelings or not wanting to say no, now just seem so like, why am I going to do that if I'm not happy with it? Like,
Yeah.
my mindset has completely changed on that. And I think what I'm getting at there is the people pleasing traits, which I mentioned a few times, but I think that's just something that was so strongly embedded in me, and that's something that I've very recently started to like chip away at and actually just like remove that personality trait, because I feel like it is a personality trait to be a yes man, to be the one that doesn't want to hurt people's feelings, so we'll just go along with things even if they don't want to always like think about what other people are thinking of you and act according to that. I think I've just found a lot of freedom in my own mind to just like get rid of those thoughts and actually just live for myself, because why the hell are we living for other people in the first place? We're all going to end up in the same box or whatever at the end of our lives, and I just find it crazy how we can get so obsessed with everyone else when what's going to happen in the end? In the end, we're all going to end up in the ground. So I just think it's crazy to think that someone else's opinion of me is more important than my own. Someone else's idea of how I should live my life is more important than my own. I just find that wild, because where are they going to end up? The exact same place as me.
It's completely true. I think I've just recently read a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, and it completely like unwinds, if that's a word, all of the thought processes behind why people pleasing tendencies happen in the first place. And it isn't a book on how to stop becoming a people pleaser, but it will help with that. Like, it's really helped me with that as well. It really empowers you to think that every time you are choosing yourself, i.e. not people pleasing, you are always going to be on the right path, because that's always the worry as well, that like, well, if I don't do this, then I won't be doing that, and then I won't end up here. Like, you're always kind of worrying about the effects of, again, like other people's thoughts, other people's actions. But actually, if you always prioritize you, yourself, and you, you're always going to be on the right path, because it's always prioritizing you. I also want to touch on, again, just that inner critic and that sense of like feeling you're always obsessing over other people's opinions, other people's like levels of happiness rather than your own. For me, it comes back to that inner critic again, because I notice that whenever I feel like I have to serve someone else or like people please, it's because my inner critic is saying, you don't deserve to not do that. The inner critic isn't saying you don't deserve to not do that, but it's like, I don't feel respectful of myself enough to actually just choose myself. Like, I don't feel confident in myself to actually say no to that person or to not do whatever it is that someone else wants me to do. Recently, it's been a little bit life-changing to know that the inner critic herself, right? She's not my enemy as well. So I've noticed I have this inner critic, right? Again, the art of noticing. I've noticed I have it. I've noticed that she talks like horribly to me, and I've tried to combat that with compassion and grace and all the things. But then I've also noticed that if I accept that she's not my enemy, and I accept that the inner critic herself is saying that because she's grown up thinking that, you know, there's a big list everyone's going to have of accomplishments, maybe a weight, maybe a certain, I don't know, nose shape that you feel like you need to have before you're worthy of love, friends, a certain career, a certain profit goal with your business. Like, literally so many things. Everyone's got a list of things that they feel worthy of achieving only when they've hit X number of things. And that inner critic, she's been raised in an environment where that list was like hammered onto her. Like she felt like she was not going to make enough money unless she looked like this and had this qualification and went to this uni. So she's obviously going to be a really harsh, like, perfectionist person, and that's fine. She needs the space to like shout and scream at me in my head. She can do that, but I don't have to listen to it. And like realizing that separation as well has been really life-changing for me this year, because I can, like, I still have the inner critic, but I'm like choosing not to listen to it. I'm like letting her yap and then being fine with it in myself. And that is also a very, very like long-winded way of being okay. Like if you feel selfish, if you feel like you're prioritizing other people, separating that thought process in your head feels really like liberating. And you feel less guilty for actually like choosing yourself sometimes, because you're like, oh well, it's not me, it's inner critic.
I think, yeah, there's definitely power in realizing you don't actually have to listen to the words that you're being told. Like you can separate yourself from them. And I think even these days, so in the same way that you kind of brought up developing this inner critic, I think when you bring social media into it, I feel like people develop it, but in the sense that the world is kind of telling them these things about themselves. So, because you mentioned like practical ways to actually kind of overcome these things and actually practice self-love, I think a really important thing these days especially is to monitor what you are consuming online. I think it's so important that people take control of their own social medias in terms of what information it's giving them. And I think people operate in the way that social media is just going to give them, and I'm talking social media in specific, like specifically because mainstream news and media is not really consumed as much. I think it's like social media, like people watching influencers or their celebrity, like favorite celebrities, their lifestyles. You think you can get so much detail about people's lives online and how they're living, and then compare it to yourself, and what they look like, compare it to yourself, and then realize such a big difference and disparity between how you're living and how someone else is living. And that becomes your inner critic. Like, you're not as good as them, you're not as pretty as them, you don't have the lifestyle they have, you don't have the money they have. And that then becomes you feeling like you're not as worthy or not good enough. I think that is so easily avoided. Stop following people that make you feel bad. Stop engaging in content that doesn't resonate with you, doesn't make you feel good, that makes you feel a certain type of way, where you come off these apps and you just feel rubbish about your own life or the way that you're living. There's so many motivational pages, and you touched on the ones even like mentioning like how you kind of realized that you had depression and how to overcome those things. But even in a sense of just like motivational people, there's pages that will help you in life, and there's pages that will actually like make you feel good. So I just wanted to like put it out there to remind people of that, because I feel like it's so easy to forget and think that the only thing that exists on the internet is celebrities and influencers and people showing their fancy lives. I create content online, but if you look at my feed and if you look at like what I consume online, it's all like self-help, like finance related, just all things to like actually learn about life and how to like level up, or like even like motivational quotes or funny stuff, like things that will uplift me. And there's so many tools that you can use on social media. Like you can literally click not interested on a video so it won't bring up something like that again. And there's little things that you can do to make your social media space and experience so much better, so that you're not feeling awful about yourself and it's not becoming that inner critic that's like telling you how rubbish your life is and how less worthy you are than all these other people that you're watching 24/7. That's one of my tips on improving your self-love, because I think that is something that's quite easily done.
You're so right. I think coming back to that list, I said everyone has the list of things that they feel like they need to do before they're worthy of any kind of self-love, and social media 100% influences that list in this day and age. So you're so right in trying to like be mindful of that and using the algorithm to your advantage, like you just said. I think something else that people can do, and this is actually quite actionable, and it's something I did but I haven't done fully. I'm gonna explain it. So I think it's kind of it comes back to, again, like self-acceptance. So like accepting yourself as you are, not someone who is going to be accepted once they achieve everything on this list. Something I have done recently, just as part of like things for work as well, is doing like, you know, those strength-based tests you can do online, and like personality tests, and like figuring out like what kind of human you are, what elements make up you as a person. Figure that out, and let it be based on science. There's like two things I really like, Clifton Strengths and 16 personalities. I don't know if you've done the 16 personalities test. Yeah. What are you?
I did it a while ago. What am I?
I'd be surprised if we're not
What are
same.
the other letters?
Well, I actually don't know what the other ones. I know I'm an INFJ. I know there's ENFJ. I don't know if there's like M's as well.
I think I might be INFP.
Oh,
I
interesting.
think something.
Yeah,
like
I'm gonna look that up.
I'll have to do it again because I forgot. Actually, I have a screenshot of it.
I know.
Somewhere.
I feel like I kind of want to do it like more regularly, just to make sure I'm not changing or anything. I don't know.
I've done it so many times. Yeah, I think that's why I've forgotten, because you can change. Like I remember at work they did this like personality test, and when I did it right at the beginning, they made us do it on the graduate, like the program when you just start work, and then I did it like 4 years later, and my thing had completely changed.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's so weird, like knowing that I was like one personality type at the beginning of starting my working life, and then I was completely different by the kind of end
that's
of it.
interesting how it changes. Once you do these tests, you then get to like recognize what parts of yourself that you can accept as a whole, including what is apparently like your weaknesses or like your flaws. Like seeing on paper that something you're stronger in an area versus a different area will allow you to accept yourself as like one big picture. And you can also use this like awareness of your personality type and your strengths to even reflect on like maybe situations in your past where you've made mistakes and you're holding yourself like account, like you have shame around that, or like you blaming yourself for things and you're holding that over your head. You can reflect on those situations, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and just say it's fine that happened because I'm not skilled or I'm not good at doing something, whether that is like work related, relationships related. You can accept the bad things that you hoard over yourself for just being bad things, because it's fine. And I think that is like doing these personality tests is a really great practical way to like help you accept yourself as like one person,
and also understand yourself. I feel like people don't actually understand who they are, and they think because they're different to other people that makes them bad or wrong.
Yes.
Or they need to change. But it's actually like, no, you are completely fine as you are. And I think what's great about that personality test, 16 personalities, it tells you at the bottom what celebrities have the same personality as you. So if you need a bit of a boost of confidence, because I remember I got Beyonce on my last one, and I was like, okay. So that's a really good one to do, because I don't know if any others have that.
Allows you to get inspired a bit. Yeah, 100%. So yeah, definitely if you want to start your self-love journey and you don't want to do anything woo-woo today, do a little personality test and then reflect on your life and tell yourself that it's okay that certain things went wrong, and that's even better because you know what you're good at and you can do more of that. And celebrate, actually. That leads me on to a really good next point. If you know what you're good at and you do those things, celebrate those things. That is something I'm so bad at, and I think it's also a problem with women as a whole in terms of not recognizing and celebrating achievements unless they're of a certain size or a certain, I don't know, some other measure of worth when it comes to success. But celebrate your small wins, and that is something that's currently being drilled into myself with my coach, because I have a PT right now, and she tells me, so this just shows that like me and Farah are just like, we're on our self-love journey, but we're not self-love queens yet. I don't want to speak for you, Farah, but I'm not.
It's in progress.
Yeah. But in my check-ins with my coach a couple of weeks ago, her feedback, she was basically like, your check-in was so negative and so harsh, but your actual progress for the week was like amazing, so it just didn't match up. That wasn't the first time that I'd received feedback like that. So that was in like a fitness context. I've received feedback like that in work. I've received it at uni. I've received it from my friends, like the fact like on paper I'm amazing, but me to me I've absolutely failed, and I'm going to like explode. Like it doesn't match up and never matches up. And she's really helped me start to celebrate the small wins and like let that compound. It hasn't compounded yet because I'm still getting used to celebrating small wins. But I know it will, because how could it not? Like if you look at it from like a factual basis, if you're celebrating yourself evenly and consistently throughout your life, how is that not going to compound into you just feeling really proud of yourself, feeling really happy for yourself for doing certain things? Like there's no way it can't happen. That could be something else that if you're listening and you don't know how to start loving yourself, because that's such a big question, you can pick something from the last few days that is good and that you're proud of yourself for doing. And it can be something so small, like maybe you clean the kitchen, maybe you got food shop done, maybe you went to the gym, went for a walk, maybe you journaled, like literally anything. It's good and you need to celebrate it.
Another thing that I think is a really underrated way of like boosting your own self-esteem, and like along the similar lines of being proud of yourself, is getting out your comfort zone. I feel like when you are just sitting in your comfort zone and you're doing the same things and you're just like used to your environment, or you're used to the like your daily schedule or your work or whatever you've got going on in your life, and you don't do anything that kind of signifies to your brain, wow, like we're out of our depths here, but we're like making something happen or we're doing something new. And then you fight the fear, because doing something new is always fear induced, that you're going to feel scared and you're going to feel like you don't know what the outcome is. But anytime you do something new and you get through it, you have an instant boost of confidence, because you realize like you actually accomplished that new thing and you actually did it and you fought through the fear, and it just gives you that extra boost. So anything new comes around later, you can use that as like your proof for how you can like get through something new and scary and daunting, and you still like push through, and you come out the other end alive and happy and like probably really excited that you've, I don't know, achieved something. So I think like getting yourself out of your comfort zone, that's something that personally for me actually in the last couple of years, since I've been like growing my socials more, every time I've done something that like was so scary, like so unbelievably scary, even if it's to the point of like attending events on my own or just doing stuff that I just would never usually do. And then you do it and then you're like, wow, actually that wasn't that bad. And people were really nice. And that was actually a really fun experience. And I met this person and I wouldn't have now got this next opportunity if it wasn't for that. And like all these positive things build on that one experience that you almost didn't do. And then next time you're like almost even more excited to go and do that thing because of the fact that like what happened before. So get out of your comfort zones. Stop sitting at home, scared to do anything, scared to approach people. Like you've just got to really, and it starts with one small thing. You don't even have to go out there and do the most crazy, wild thing ever. You just have to do that one thing that's like slightly nerve-wracking or slightly like puts you a little bit on edge. But once you get through that, I think it's all about like creating that portfolio of proof.
Oh,
And
I
when
love
you
that.
have this like stack of like things that you can actually look at and be like, oh, I did this for the first time and it was actually like it ended really well, or I tried this something new and that was really good as well. And then whenever you try something new the next time, you can just look back at all those things that you've tried new before, or just experiences that you've had that were really scary to begin with, and realize actually it ain't that bad. And you feel good in yourself. You feel so much more like accomplished and like proud of yourself, but also you have this new like self-love and grown self-esteem because of the fact that you're doing new things, you're doing things that like are unfamiliar. And I think it's really important to like, I think actually what happened with me is I spent like a year doing all that stuff, and I boosted my self-esteem quite a lot, and then I don't know what happened, but I just kind of calmed down, went into my shell a bit, like I think this was the previous year just gone, and my self-esteem, I felt it in myself, like it fully like dipped, and I kind of like lost that willingness to like put myself out there, and I became a bit more in my shell. And it was only like after the fact I realized I'd done that, but then I was like, why am I doing this? Because I've just done all this stuff that was scary, but I still did it and I loved it. But now I'm in this place where, and it was because I'd spent so long being in my comfort zone and I'd spent so long not putting myself out there, that you kind of get stuck in this rut and you think that it's not possible and it's going to go badly and you just like overthink. And that's when you start developing anxieties which like shouldn't even exist.
Yeah, and I really, really love that, calling it portfolio of proof.
I think I heard that somewhere.
And well, it's yours now.
I'm taking it.
But you're completely right with like the fact that you need to do it consistently, because I think also that self-love is like a muscle in the same way that like discipline and consistency and everything is. It's a muscle that you need to like keep flexing in order for it to keep growing. And like in the same way that if you don't eat enough protein, your muscles are gonna get smaller and smaller. If you don't build enough portfolio of proof and like keep adding to that portfolio, the muscle of self-love is just gonna get smaller and smaller. And I don't want that to come across as like pressure to keep getting out of your comfort zone all the time, because that's a very scary and daunting thought itself. But like Farah said, I think you can do like really small things to do that. For me at uni, it was like going to the gym by myself. It could be, I don't know, going for a walk by yourself, sitting in a coffee shop by yourself, going to the movies, you know, just doing tiny things that you wouldn't normally do. And something I really want to add as well to anyone kind of scared about getting out of their comfort zone, ask yourself and write down, actually, what is the worst thing that could happen if you did that thing? Like, what is actually worst case scenario? Because I would bet my entire life that worst case scenario isn't actually something that is like life changing or life ending, or something that's gonna be so bad that you're better off just staying at home and not doing that thing. Because most of the time it's that inner critic again just coming out and like saying that the world's gonna end if you don't do that thing, and you just need to shut her up.
Put her in a place.
Well, actually, yeah, get that. Have you seen that trend on TikTok right now? It's like people like rolling out tape, being like, "Yeah, you can just shut up now."
Yeah.
Yeah, you basically just do that to your inner critic. And yeah, tell her to shut up and do the thing. If it helps, I think it would be a great task to actually just write down like a list of things that make you feel uncomfortable, and then next to them just write down what is the worst thing that will happen if you do this thing, and then day by day do one of those things, or like week by week just do one of those things. And I think also in order to do something uncomfortable or get out of your comfort zone in the first place, I mentioned very briefly earlier in the podcast, like forgiving yourself for things that went wrong, or forgiving yourself for like situations where you made mistakes and you've hoarded those mistakes over yourself. If you forgive yourself for those mistakes, it's so much easier to then go into new situations, because you know within yourself that you've forgiven yourself before, you can do it again. Like there's no be all and end all to doing new things, and like you know that if something goes wrong or if something bad happens, that it's fine, and like the world's not going to end. And like again, if you've done it before, you can do it again, in terms of forgiving yourself.
As someone who has the pressure of trying to be a perfectionist all the time, it's really hard to like overcome the fact that you're going to make mistakes and have compassion for yourself for making mistakes and moving past them. So if you're that type of person, I think it's just a case of recognizing like, no, that's your perfectionist nature coming out, like holding you back from being able to accept that you've made a mistake and have that bit more compassion for yourself. The fact that you recognized it and you acknowledge that it was the wrong thing to do and it's something that you don't want to do going forward is enough. Like you've done the right thing by even taking that step. Some people don't do that. Some people assume they're right in every situation, and even when they hurt people.
Well, I think you either assume you're right in every situation, or you have a little bit of a victim mindset or a victim complex. And I think having a victim complex is like, it's not as horrible as it sounds. Like it's not a bad thing to have, because it is just your brain's way of deflecting from yourself, right? Like we were saying at the beginning of the episode, it takes that certain level of noticing and being reflective in order to start your self-love journey. And if you're in that space of like thinking that everything in the world is against you, and you're the product of other things going wrong, then it's hard to actually get to that point. But like alongside forgiving yourself comes like accepting yourself as like a whole complete person, which relates back to like if you do a personality test, then you know you as a person is built from these strengths and these weaknesses, and you can like, if you accept that as a whole, you then accept that you have control over like your life, because you know what is good and what is bad. And if you accept that you have control of your life, you can like dig yourself out of a victim mindset or a victim complex, because accepting you have control means that you also have like, you control the reins of what goes wrong and what goes right. And you can also accept that when you get into a certain situation, you can also get yourself out, because if you got yourself in, you can get yourself out. So it's also that like accepting that, you know, you have choices, the control is always in your hands, and that, well, the opposite, like you can't be controlled about by like external factors and things as well. That is also doing the hard work, like accepting the bad parts of yourself, and like accepting that actually I don't have to sit and complain about this thing going wrong. I could actually change it. Like that is doing hard work, because it is just easy to sit around and mope. Like I've done it.
Same. Trust me, same.
It's easy, it's effortless, but it's gonna, like Farah said, like what happens at the end of that, we'll all be in a box, really sad. But I don't think I'd be in a box. But yeah, anyway.
My brother sent me this video the other day. It actually rounds off that point quite nicely. And it was just basically explaining how, like, we're all going to die at some point. But then when that happens, your grandkids' generation will remember you. But then the great grandkids' generation probably won't have that much of a memory of you. And it just keeps going down to the point where, do you know who your great, 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 great grandparents are? Or, like, know anything about them? Like, all of us don't, because like that's just what happens. That's the circle of life. So why spend the life while you have it miserable and like beating yourself up or like not doing the things you want to do, when in like 100 years from now, literally no one is even going to know any of the mistakes you made. They're not going to know all these things that you have in your head that's like negative. So like there's always better reasons to have positives in your own mind as well, and just focus on things in that positive light, so that while you're here and while you're existing, you have a good life and you are like full of that positive energy and mindset. Because at the end of the day, like nothing else really matters. Like beyond this point, it doesn't matter.
There's a TikTok trend a couple years ago now, which is a bit gross, but it was like someone sitting and then you zoom out and it was like the earth, and you zoom out and it was like the galaxy, and you zoomed out and it was like the universe. When you actually think about it, you're a tiny person, and for me a comforting thought is just like, I matter to no one. And that might be a scary thought for some people, but if you flip it on its head and just think like the things you do, like you said, in 100 years it doesn't matter. So just do it for yourself, and like do it for the day right in front of you, and be selfish and take your personality test and accept yourself. Like, you know what I mean?
So that was a big one. We had a lot to say on the topic of self-love, but I think that just goes to show like how important this topic is and how we should all be thinking about it a lot more. So hopefully this week is a bit of inspo and extra encouragement to embark on your self-love journey if you haven't already. Hopefully we've given you some good actionable next steps and tips for you to take away. Let us know in the comments if you have any other tips, because we all want to learn from each other around here. Let us know if you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, or don't forget to check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and give us a rating over there. Let us know if you're enjoying the podcast. And with all that being said, we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.